Welcome back to the deep dive. I want to start today by asking you to just completely change your perspective.
Okay.
Because usually when we talk about nature or biology on this show, we're looking for the big picture.
Right.
You know, the 30,000-foot view.
Right. The macro stuff. Global trends, forest canopies, that sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And, I mean, that's natural.
It is. That's where the grandeur is. It's what grabs the headlines.
It really is. But today, I want to go in the complete opposite direction.
Down.
Way down. Past the shrubs, past the ferns, right down into the dirt, into the duff layer.
The biological litter.
Right. I want you to picture just a single fallen pine cone.
Okay.
It's half buried in the mud, it's rotting, and it's probably been stepped on by a hiker or a deer.
Right.
To most of us, you know, that's just debris.
It's trash. It's something you literally kick out of the way without a second thought.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But according to this massive stack of research we're covering today, and we have everything here, from genomic sequencing studies to 19th century taxonomic papers.
It's a really diverse stack of sources.
It is. And according to all of it, that single pine cone is actually a battlefield.
It's a fortress.
Yes. And it happens to be the home of one of the most bizarre, chemically sophisticated, and frankly, ridiculous-looking organisms we've ever discussed.
I am so glad you brought up the look of it early, because the morphology here is, well, it's totally unique. We are talking about Auriscalpium vulgare.
The pine cone mushroom.
Yes. But if you picture a typical mushroom in your head,
Like a white button mushroom from the store.
right, or a classic red toadstool, you need to erase that image immediately.
Completely.
This thing is an engineering marvel, but it's disguised as a hairy little spoon.
I have to say, one of the sources, mushroomexpert.com, they described it in a way that actually made me laugh out loud when I read it.
Oh, the Periscope analogy.
Yes. They called it a, quote, goofy little mushroom that looks like a little periscope sent up from a pinecone submarine.
It's an incredibly accurate description, honestly. It perfectly captures how it grows. It isn't just sitting on top of the soil. It's actively navigating out of something.
Right. So our mission today for this deep dive is to unpack that submarine.
Absolutely.
We're going to look at how this thing navigates gravity
Yeah.
in a way that just shouldn't be possible. We're going to look at the chemical warfare it wages against other fungi. And we'll see how it actually thrives in the aftermath of a forest fire.
It really is a story about extreme specialization.
Yeah.
It's about finding a niche that nobody else wants, like a hard, woody, resin-filled pine cone, and evolving the exact, highly specific tools to conquer it.
So let's start with the name, because pinecone mushroom is easy enough to remember, but the scientific name, Auriscalpium vulgare, I mean, it sounds ancient.
It does.
It sounds like something you'd find in a medieval apothecary right next to the leeches.
Well, it practically is. The etymology actually gives away the visual immediately if you know your Latin.
Break it down for us.
So Auriscalpium comes from two Latin words. Auris means ear, and scalpo means to scratch or to pick.
The ear scratcher.
Or the ear pick.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Historically, before we had cotton swabs or Q-tips, people used these small spoon-shaped metal or bone instruments to literally scoop wax out of their ears.
That sounds incredibly dangerous.
It was. They were called ear picks. And if you look at the cap of this mushroom, it's not a centered umbrella like a normal mushroom.
Right, the stem is on the side.
Exactly. It's kidney-shaped or spoon-shaped, and it sits off-center on this tough little stalk.
So it looks exactly like a tiny fuzzy spoon you would stick in your ear.
If you were brave enough, yes. And vulgar just means common, so the common ear pick.
That is such a vivid name. But looking at the taxonomy history and the sources, it seems like scientists really didn't know what to do with this thing for a long time.
Oh, it caused a massive amount of confusion. But that's a common theme in mycology, really.
Huh?
Fungi are notoriously difficult to categorize just by looking at them.
Right.
Back in 1753, Carl Linnaeus, you know, the father of modern taxonomy.
The guy who literally wrote the book on naming things.
Right. He looked at this mushroom and saw that it had teeth underneath the cap instead of gills.
We should probably clarify that for everyone. Because
Okay.
most people know gills like the lines under a portobello.
Or pores, like on a sponge mushroom.
But this has teeth.
Spines, really. Thousands of tiny, dangling little spines pointing straight down.
Okay.
So Linnaeus saw those spines and immediately grouped it with the Hygiene genus. Those are the hedgehog mushrooms. They also have teeth. So his thought process was, same feature, same family.
Which is a totally reasonable assumption for 1753. If it has teeth, it's a hedgehog.
Reasonable, but completely incorrect.
Yeah.
It's a classic case of convergent evolution.
Like sharks and dolphins.
Exactly. Just because a dolphin and a shark both have fins doesn't mean they're related. They just both evolved to move efficiently through water.
So nature just sort of decided that teeth were a really good design for dropping spores, and multiple, totally unrelated mushrooms adopted the blueprint.
That's exactly it. Teeth provide incredible surface area for spores. But it actually took until 1821 for a British mycologist named Samuel Frederick Gray to realize this pinecone dweller was totally unique.
He's the one who gave it the Auriscalpium genus.
Yes, he pulled it out of the hedgehog family.
But where does modern DNA put it? Because I was looking at the genetic lineage in the notes, and there are some really surprising cousins in there.
This is the real twist. Genetically, it's in the order Russellies.
Okay, what else is in there?
Well, it links it to the Brittlegills, those classic red and purple mushrooms you see popping up in the woods everywhere, but also to Clavicorona, which looks exactly like underwater coral.
And lion's mane, right?
Yes, Hericium.
Wait, lion's mane, like the big, shaggy white blob that people take nootropic supplements of?
That is the cousin.
That is wild.
Yeah.
So you have a shaggy white blob, a delicate coral, a standard red toadstool, and a tiny brown earpick growing on a pine cone.
Right.
And they're all family.
It really shows you that you absolutely cannot judge a fungus by its fruiting body. The genetic lineage tells a completely different story than the physical shape.
It's just adapting to the real estate.
Exactly. It highlights how adaptable fungi are. They totally morph their physical structure to suit their highly specific environment while keeping their underlying genetic core the same.
Well, let's stick on that physical shape for a second, because the texture of this thing seems to be a huge deal on all the field guides. They keep using this specific word, hispid.
Hispid. It's a fantastic botanical term. It basically means bristly or hairy.
Hairy.
Yeah. If you touch the cap of an Auriscalpium, it's not smooth, and it's definitely not slimy. It's covered in these stiff, dark brown or blackish hairs. The stem is exactly the same. It's very tough, very wiry, and hairy.
It honestly sounds incredibly unappetizing, like a little wet hairbrush growing out of a piece of wood.
It's incredibly tough. You wouldn't want to chew it. And there's a neat little trick if you're a mycologist carrying a chemistry set in the woods.
Which admittedly is a pretty niche hobby.
Very niche. But if you have it, you can do a quick field test. You just drop a little KOH potassium hydroxide onto the cap.
And what happens?
It instantly turns black. Jet black.
Wow.
It's a definitive chemical signature. It's one of the ways experts quickly separate it from a few lookalikes out in the field.
Okay, so we've got a good visual now. We've identified the beast. It's a hairy, toothy, kidney-shaped periscope that turns black with chemicals.
That's the one.
But what really grabbed me in this research, and it really blew my mind, was how it actually grows. You mentioned earlier that it's an engineering marvel.
Geotropism. This is where that submarine periscope analogy goes from being a cute joke to being literal science.
Because pine cones aren't stable environments.
How's that?
They fall from a tree, maybe 100 feet up, they bounce, they roll, they get kicked.
Exactly. Imagine you are a fungus living entirely inside a pine cone. That single cone is your entire universe.
Right.
But that universe has just crash landed. It could be upside down, it could be lying on its side, or wedged at some weird 45-degree angle in the mud.
So the concept of up is totally variable.
But for a mushroom to actually work, for it to release its spores effectively so the wind can catch them, it needs to be incredibly precise.
How precise?
Well, the cap needs to be perfectly horizontal to act as a roof, protecting the spores from the rain, and those little teeth underneath, they have to be perfectly vertical, plumb straight down.
Why straight down?
Because gravity has to pull the microscopic spores down into the air currents. If the teeth are crooked, even slightly, the spores just hit the side of the tooth as they fall and get stuck. The whole reproductive cycle fails.
So how does the Auriscalpium figure that out? It's inside a buried cone. It doesn't have eyes, doesn't have a gyroscope.
But it does have a gyroscope, chemically speaking. It uses a complex 3-stage geotropic response. It's literally like a pilot checking instruments during a blind landing in the fog.
Okay, walk us through this flight check. How does stage 1 work?
Stage 1 is all about the stem. The primordia, the baby mushroom, bursts out from between the tough woody scales of the pine cone, and its only biological imperative is just get away from the ground.
So it's negatively geotropic.
Exactly. Aggressively so. The research shows that if you take a pine cone with a developing stem and physically rotate it 90 degrees in a lab.
Just tilt it on its side.
Right. That stem will correct its course and bend itself back to absolute vertical within 24 hours.
That is incredibly fast for a plant.
Fungi aren't plants, remember?
Right. Good catch. But still, 24 hours to completely change direction.
It's constantly sensing the gravitational vector and actively adjusting its growth hormones on one side of the stem to bend it.
Okay, so that's stage 1. Periscope up.
Periscope up. Then we hit stage 2, which is cap formation. Once the stem is high enough to clear whatever pine needles and debris are around the cone, the fungus switches its programming.
It changes modes.
It becomes digeotropic.
Digeotropic.
Yes. Dia meaning across. It wants to grow at a right angle to gravity. It wants to go flat.
And this is what creates that shelf-like offset kidney shape we talked about.
Exactly. It stops growing up and it starts stretching out sideways to build the roof.
And then stage 3.
Stage 3 is the spines, the teeth. They switch back to being positively geotropic.
So they grow strictly towards the center of the earth. Up, then flat, then down.
But here is the real engineering marvel. The sources highlight that there's an overlap period.
What do you mean?
The cap is expanding sideways at the exact same time the teeth are starting to grow downwards. It doesn't wait for the roof to finish before starting the teeth.
How does that matter?
Because it ensures constant micro-adjustments. No matter how janky the angle of the pine cone gets, say a deer steps on it, halfway through growth, the mushroom is constantly self-orienting to drop those spores cleanly.
It's literally a self-leveling suspension system.
Precisely. And it does all of this incredibly fast. The whole process, from the first tiny bump on the cone to a fully formed, mature mushroom, takes anywhere from 9 to 35 days.
That's quick.
But spore production, that starts within 48 to 72 hours of the cap starting to form.
Wow, it is a total rush job.
It has to be an efficient job. Think about its environment. It has to maximize the chance of reproduction before a squirrel eats the cone, or the whole thing dries out in the sun, or gets buried deeper by falling leaves.
It's a race against the clock.
Exactly.
Which actually brings us perfectly to the next major point, the turf war.
Yes, the succession.
Because I assumed, totally wrongly, when I started reading this, that once a mushroom claims a pine cone, that's it. It's the king of the castle. It owns the resource.
That makes sense logically.
But the genomic study you sent over paints a very, very different picture. It's not a castle at all.
No, it's more like a timeshare that inevitably ends in a hostile corporate takeover.
And this is the relationship between our Auriscalpium and another genus of fungi called Strobilurus.
Strobilurus, they're often called the cone caps.
Yeah.
If you walk through a Douglas fir forest or a Scots pine forest, you will definitely see them. They look much more like traditional little mushrooms.
So they have gills, not teeth.
Right. Gilled, brownish gray, very standard looking. And the crazy thing is they grow on the exact same cones as our hairy little ear pick.
But not at the same time.
Rarely at the same time. It's an ecological succession. And this is where the biochemistry gets genuinely fascinating.
Break it down.
Auriscalpium is the pioneer. It's the breacher. It shows up on cones that have just fallen from the tree, sometimes as early as August or September of the exact same year.
And those fresh cones are tough. I mean, they aren't rotting yet.
They're armored tanks. A fresh pine cone is biologically designed to protect its seeds from everything. It's made of heavily cross-linked lignin, which is basically natural concrete.
And they're sticky.
Exactly. They are completely saturated with resin and latex.
Which are naturally antifungal, right?
Yeah.
The tree put those chemicals there specifically to stop fungi from eating the cone.
Yes. Most fungi cannot even touch a fresh cone. Their spores land and they just die or wash off. But Auriscalpium, the genome study revealed it has a highly specific chemical arsenal just for this scenario.
The heavy artillery.
It has a massive number of genes coding for lignases.
Enzymes that literally dissolve the lignin, the concrete.
Yes. But even more crucially, it has specialized peptidases, specifically types S8 and S53.
And what do those do?
They are enzymes that have evolved to target and break down the specific proteins found in the tree's resin and latex.
So Auriscalpium is literally the breaching team. They're cutting through the barbed wire, blowing the vault doors.
That is the perfect analogy. They expend a massive amount of metabolic energy just to break through that primary defense system. Ecologists call them primary resource capturers.
They want those high-value sugars trapped inside a cone, but they have to work incredibly hard through the armor to get them.
Right, and this is a big but once the armor is breached and the Auriscalpium has done all the hard work,
Enter Strobilurus.
enter the scavenger. Strobilurus typically appears much later in the cycle. It shows up on cones that are now black, partially rotten, and actively degrading.
Because Auriscalpium already chewed it up.
Exactly. By the time Strobilurus arrives, the lignin is cracked. The toxic resin has been neutralized by the peptidases. The whole cone is softer.
The table is set.
And Strobelurus is built specifically for the second course. The genomic data shows it has way more glycoside hydrolases.
Which digests the soft stuff.
Right. Cellulose and pectin, the easy calories that are now completely accessible thanks to the pioneer.
So Auriscalpium chews the rind, and Strobelurus eats the soft center. But the study explicitly used the phrase chemical warfare, and that implies Strobelurus isn't just politely waiting its turn for the leftovers.
Oh, absolutely not. It's highly aggressive. Strobelurus brings an actual biological weapon to the fight.
What is it?
These fungi produce a specialized class of chemicals called strobelurins.
Wait, Strobelurins. That sounds really familiar.
It should. We humans actually synthesize them. Strobelurins are currently one of the most widely used agricultural fungicides on the planet.
Really?
Yes. Farmers spray them on wheat, rice, grapes to kill crop-destroying fungi.
But nature invented them first.
Millions of years ago, inside a pine cone.
So Strobelurus shows up late to the party, finds the Auriscalpium already eating, and just releases a cloud of agricultural-grade poison gas.
Effectively, yes. It produces these intense toxins specifically to kill off any competitors, including whatever's linked to the Auriscalpium network inside the cone, so it can monopolize the remaining nutrients.
It's a strategy of total wipeout,
Yeah.
secondary resource capture.
It's brutal, but highly effective. And the sources identified these specific tag teams playing out on different tree species all over the world.
Give me an example.
Well, on the Scots pine, you always get Auriscalpium vulgare first, then Strobelurus stephanocystis comes in for the kill. On the Yunnan pine in Asia, it's Auriscalpium orientale first, followed by Strobelurus luchuensis.
It's a global pattern. The pioneer followed immediately by the assassin.
Every time. And the really sad part for our little earpick mushroom is that it doesn't even seem to fight back.
It doesn't have its own toxins.
The genetic analysis shows that Auriscalpium focuses almost all its evolutionary energy on fighting the plant, the resins and the lignin. It simply doesn't have the gene clusters required to manufacture strong antifungal toxins to fight off Strobelurus.
So it's a digger, not a soldier.
It relies entirely on a get-in, get-rich, get-out strategy. By the time Strobelurus shows up with the chemical weapons, Auriscalpium has to hope it's already fruited, dropped its spores, and sent its genetic line off to find the next fresh cone.
It's just a constant race against time and toxicity.
It really is.
Now, speaking of absolute destruction, there was another study in this stack that threw me for a total loop.
Ah, the fire ecology one.
Yes, it was a study from Northeast India, and it challenges everything I thought I knew about forest fires and mushrooms.
The Jaham cultivation study. It's a fantastic piece of research.
Because normally, we think fire kills mushrooms. Fire sterilizes the ground. It kills everything. But this study found the exact opposite.
Right, so they were looking at Kazi pine forests in the Meghalaya region, where local farmers practice slash-and-burn agriculture.
They slash the brush in December, and they burn it in March.
Exactly. And their researchers wanted to see what happened to the fungal populations on the pine cones after these burns.
And what did they find?
They found significantly more Auriscalpium basidiocarps, the actual mushrooms on the burn cones, compared to the unburned cones.
That just seems impossible. Wouldn't a fire just incinerate a delicate mycelial network?
It absolutely would if the mycelium was already inside and actively growing when the fire hit. But remember the timeline. The mature cones often fall after the fire, or the fire burns fast across the litter layer, scorching the old cones without vaporizing them.
So the fire isn't killing the fungus, it's modifying the house.
Exactly. It modifies the substrate. And it does it in two critical ways, mechanically and hydrologically.
Break down the mechanical part first.
The intense heat of the fire physically cracks the tough outer scales of the pine cone. It causes massive fissures in the lignin.
Oh, I see. So the fire is basically doing the breaching work that the enzymes usually have to do.
Precisely. It compromises the armor. It essentially pre-chews the food for the fungus. It makes it exponentially easier for the Auriscalpium spores, which blow in after the fire, to get deep inside and start colonizing the nutrient-rich center.
That makes total sense. But what about the hydrology? Because fire dries things out. You'd think a scorched cone would be way too dry for a moisture-loving mushroom.
You would think so, but a cracked charred cone actually acts like a sponge. Yes. The study found a direct correlation. The deeply buried cones obviously held the most moisture, but right behind them were the burned cones. The unburned fresh cones sitting on the surface were actually the driest inside.
Because they were still completely sealed shut with that waterproof resin.
Exactly. So the fire burns away the resin, cracks the shell, the rain gets in and soaks the charred wood, and the Auriscalpium spore lands and says, perfect conditions. Let's grow.
That is amazing.
They were finding up to 4 fruiting bodies on a single burned cone. On the unburned cones, they rarely found more than 1, if they found any at all.
And I remember there was a size correlation too, right?
Yeah, simple linear relationship. Bigger burned cones equaled more mushrooms. It's just basic math of available calories.
It really paints this picture of this goofy little mushroom as an ultimate survivor. It masters gravity, it dissolves toxic resin, it gets bullied by chemical assassins, and it actively thrives after a devastating forest fire.
It is the absolute definition of resilience.
Which brings us to the question that I guarantee at least a few listeners are yelling at their speakers right now.
Edibility.
Can I eat it?
Well, I always tell people, define can.
Right.
Is it toxic? No. Will it put you in the hospital or kill you? No.
Wow.
But it is essentially like trying to eat the pine cone itself.
The sources were pretty unanimous on this. They used words like tough, woody, and leathery.
And the taste is generally described as mild to slightly bitter. There's absolutely no culinary value here.
Though there was that one weird historical footnote you pointed out.
Right. From an 1887 botanical textbook, it bizarrely claimed that Auriscalpium was commonly eaten in France and Italy.
Which, I mean, the French will eat anything with enough butter and garlic, but really, ear-pick fungus.
Modern mycologists are almost certain that was just a misidentification by the author. Or maybe 1887 was just a remarkably terrible year for crops, and people were desperate.
Desperate times call for pinecone mushrooms.
Exactly. But seriously, do not bother trying to eat it.
But there is actually a much better reason not to take it than just the bad taste. And this touches on a really fascinating ethical debate in foraging.
The island dilemma. This is such an important concept for people who love the outdoors to understand.
Because usually we tell foragers that picking a mushroom is exactly like picking an apple from an apple tree.
Right. The actual organism, the mycelial network, is entirely underground. It's vast, it's hidden, and just plucking the fruiting body off the top doesn't hurt the organism at all. It's just taking the fruit.
But Auriscalpium is fundamentally different.
It's different because the mycelium isn't in the vast, endless soil. It is completely 100% trapped inside that one single pine cone.
The cone is a finite universe, an island.
Exactly. And the ratio of the fruit body, that little hairy periscope you see, to the total microscopic mass of the fungus inside the cone is incredibly high.
So it takes a massive percentage of the organism's total energy budget just to build that one tiny mushroom.
Yes. So if you pick it, you aren't just taking an apple from a massive tree. You are ripping away half the organism's entire life savings.
And unlike a soil fungus, you can't just reach out further into the dirt to find more nutrients to rebuild. The cone is all there is.
Once the energy in that cone is spent, it's gone forever. So picking the mushroom depletes the organism in a very permanent, devastating way.
Plus, let's be honest, they are so incredibly small and hard to spot. Finding one buried in the needles feels like a massive victory in itself. Why ruin the victory by killing it?
Exactly. Take a picture. Get down on the ground, admire the engineering, and let it drop its spores so the next generation can find a new cone.
I love that. Before we wrap up, though, we should probably help people actually identify these things if they do go looking.
Yeah.
Because they are perfectly camouflaged.
They really are.
We've talked about the periscope look, the hairy texture, the teeth, but are there lookalikes out there that might trick people?
There are always lookalikes in mycology. We call them LBJs.
LBJ.
Little brown jobs. It's an affectionate term for the thousands of tiny brown mushrooms that are a nightmare to identify.
Catchy. So who are the main suspects for confounding our ear pick?
The main one is actually the nemesis we spent so much time talking about earlier, Strobilurus.
The chemical assassin.
Right. If you find a small brown mushroom growing on a pine cone, pick up the cone and flip it over. If the mushroom has gills, straight paper-like lines radiating from the stem, it's likely Strobilurus.
But if it has teeth, the little hanging stalactite spines, it's our Auriscalpium.
Gills versus teeth. It's the easiest distinction.
Simple enough. Are there any others?
There's Biospora myosura, the conifer cone cap. It also grows on cones, usually spruce. But again, it's paler, it's absolutely not hairy, and it has gills.
Okay, so gills rule it out.
Mostly. But then there is Bincura violescens. This one is tricky because it actually does have teeth.
Oh, a fellow toothy mushroom. How do we tell the difference there?
Size, shape, and color. Bincura is generally much bigger. It has a thick central stem, not that weird offset side periscope look.
And color.
If you slice a Bankera open, the flesh inside is a distinct lilac color.
Lilac flesh, yeah, that's a dead giveaway. Auriscalpium is just tough and brown inside.
Exactly.
Now, finally, I want to quickly address a branding issue I noticed in the research. One of the sources we looked at trying to find information on this was from a site literally called Zombie Mushrooms.
Which is a brilliant URL, by the way.
It's a great URL, but I think it leads to some serious public confusion. Because this thing grows exclusively out of a dead thing, a fallen pine cone. People sometimes lump it in with actual zombie fungi.
You mean like cordyceps?
Right. The ones that take over ant brains and sprout out of their heads.
Yeah.
The whole Last of Us scenario.
We definitely need to be clear on this. Auriscalpium is absolutely not a parasite. It is strictly saprobic.
Meaning it only eats dead matter.
Correct. It doesn't kill anything. It doesn't infect living trees or insects. It simply recycles biological material that is already dead and detached.
So no Last of Us apocalypse, starting with a pinecone mushroom.
Definitely not. I mean, unless you are a pine cone.
True.
If you are a pine cone, this is absolutely the apocalypse. You are being dissolved by specialized enzymes, invaded by periscopes, gassed by agricultural toxins, and turned slowly into soil.
Fair point. Perspective really is everything, isn't it?
It really is.
So we've gone from the 30,000-foot view of the forest all the way down to the microscopic. We've seen gravity-bending acrobatics, enzymatic lockpicking, chemical warfare, and fire survival.
All happening on a tiny piece of trash you'd step on without noticing.
It completely changes how you think about a walk in the woods, doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
I really want you, the listener, to think about that invisible war next time you step into a forest.
Think about the timeline playing out under your boots. That cone falls. It sits there, locked tight, armored in resin. Then Auriscalpium finds it, breaches the walls, and sets up its little periscope to drop spores.
And then Strobelurus comes in with the poison gas to mop up the remains and steal the house.
And all of that biology, all that microscopic violence and incredible engineering is exactly what creates the soil we stand on. It breaks down the tough lignin so the carbon can finally go back into the earth, which eventually feeds the next giant pine tree.
It's a perfect closed loop. And these tiny, goofy-looking hairy mushrooms are the invisible engine that keeps the whole thing running.
It's profound in a weird way.
It is. So, next time you're out there on a trail, don't just look up at the canopy. Get down on your knees, dig through the pine needles. Look for the little hairy submarine periscope fighting its quiet war.
Just please do not try to eat it.
Right. Do not eat the ear pick. Leave it to its war. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
See you next time.